Gonna have fun, okay?
Let's do it.
So, here you go, Voices of Midway, here in the theater of the U.S. Air Force Auxiliary for 22 years. So, I'm an Air Force guy on a Navy ship. What can go wrong with that, okay? So, do you guys know where you're at today? Where are we? San Diego, good answer. Midway?
Midway.
Okay, I'll take that. More specifically, you're in front of the Battle of Midway Theater. That's part of the Battle of Midway exhibit aboard the USS Midway. You kind of see a theme going on here, okay? USS Midway, CV-41. Does anybody know what the CV-41 stands for? Good, neither do I. No. Well, no, I'm an Air Force guy, but I had to learn, okay? C stands for carrier. V is a French word, volar, to fly. We're talking about heavier than air, fixed wing. 41, the 41st aircraft carrier. Authorized, funded by Congress, built in 17 months. They laid the keel of the Midway in October of 1943 and put her into service in September of 1945, 1 week after World War II ended. She served for 47 years, all the way through the Persian Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, 1991, and then she was retired in 1992. So 1 year before she's retired, she did 3,400 sorties in 43 days. Quite an accomplishment. So very, very proud of this great old lady, okay? When you get up on the flight deck and you look across the bay, you'll see CVN 70 and CVN 72. The Carl Vinson, the Abraham Lincoln, N stands for nuclear power. Nimitz class carriers. Every carrier needs a source of energy to heat the water, to create the steam, to run the engines and catapults. They use nuclear power for that. We use conventional marine oil. We had a 2.1 million gallon gas tank, 260 gallons per mile at half speed, 15 knots. You need 30 knots of wind across the deck for planes to land and take off, because an aircraft carrier has to have and make its own wind if need be to get planes to land and take off. So, 260 gallons per mile at half speed, that's about 100,000 gallons a day. But they build up that speed, 700,000 gallons a day. So we're topping off anywhere between 3 and 5 times a week. Those guys refuel every 25 years when they replace the nuclear rods. So they're a Prius and we're not. We're a museum. They're not. So there you go. So what is so cool is you're standing on history that's been made, and you're looking at history being made. I just find that is so cool, okay? So we have to ask ourselves, what is an aircraft carrier? Isn't that a good question? What's an aircraft carrier? It's simply an international airport. You put that carrier off of somebody's coast and you can reach out and touch them 400, 600 miles away. And isn't that what happened to us on December 7th, 1941? What happened on that date? Pearl Harbor. 6 Japanese aircraft carriers off the coast of Oahu launched their planes and took out 21 of our ships. Our battleships, destroyers, frigates, gosh. They were damaged, sank. We were hurting. The Pacific Fleet, the backbone was broken. But 6 months later, at the Battle of Midway, 81 years ago, this week, 3 American aircraft carriers, the Hornet, the Enterprise, the Yorktown, launched their aircraft and took out 4 of the 6 Japanese carriers involved at Pearl Harbor, and we sank them in 1 day. Such a historic, significant event. I mean, we stopped the momentum of the Japanese Imperial Navy. We went from the defensive to the offensive and no turning back. So the rest is history. So we're named after that historic battle, that significant event. Now, every plane that you see in Midway's collection is an authentic plane that's flown off of a carrier from 1945 to 1992. You've got the Dauntless, the dive bomber that won the war in the South Pacific. You've got the Wildcat, the fighter that provided coverage and strike capabilities for the fleet. Down to the hangar bay, you'll see Korean War, World War II era. Popping up on the flight deck, more Korean War, and Vietnam era. We did 3 tours in Vietnam. In fact, when you look on the island, you'll see those Those red airplanes, those represent 8 MiGs that were shot down by Midway aircrew during the Vietnam War. And in fact, this is the first and last MiGs, Midway aircrew. All the way through the Persian Gulf War, the A-6 and the F-18 Hornet. So from the Dauntless to the Hornet, that reflects our history. So that's pretty cool. Now, did I tell you that I was a chaplain? And did I also say the planes were authentic? Our chaplain's supposed to tell the truth, not lie? And not this guy behind me. This plane, no. This is a 1930s Devastator. 138 of them were built. By the time World War II began, they were old and obsolete. They flew slow and low. They dropped a torpedo that wasn't even tested until after the Battle of Midway. You'll see in the movie that 51 of those planes went out at the Battle of Midway and only 7 returned. It's not good to be a torpedo bomber pilot, okay? Okay? So, when I was your age, and I'm watching World War II movies, and you can still see some of them around, they put models on fish wire, made it look like they're flying. Kind of cheesy, okay? And then when I was in college, that SNJ, that yellow plane back there, they painted those to look like Japanese zeros for Tora Tora Tora, because there's no airworthy zeros around. How many saw the movie Midway in 2019? You see that movie? Yeah. For that movie, they wanted to be authentic and historically accurate. They wanted to tell the story of those brave torpedo bomber pilots and crew that went out and never returned. But what do you do when you want to tell that story and the plane doesn't exist anymore because they're all at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean? Battles of Coral Sea, Midway, Guadalcanal. Lansky went up to the Library of Congress, pulled out the schematics, and they built a replica. That's a movie prop. That was in that movie. That is just foam over steel rods. You see the rivets? Thumbtacks. So when Lionsgate finished the movie, they said, what are we going to do with this thing? Because would that fit in your house if you're collecting stuff? It wouldn't fit mine. And you put it outside because of its composition, it'll deteriorate. So when they said they're going to get rid of it, we said, we'll take it in a heartbeat. Because we've got the Dauntless, we've got the Wildcat, and now we've got the Devastator. The 3 primary aircraft involved at the Battle of Midway. Pretty cool. Part of our collection. But more importantly, you see a name on the side of the plane. Ensign George Gay. You're going to meet George in the movie. He's going to be the leading voice of Voices of Midway. He's the lone survivor from Torpedo 8. This is his story. And what's significant too is, you see that photo there, that young, charming young lady? She's got the bunting, she's got a champagne thing. That's Barbara Cox. She's going to launch the ship into service. She's a congressman's daughter, part of the communications family. They still support the ship today. So, she was there with that gentleman standing next to her in the uniform. That is George Gay. So George Gay was president when Midway was launched into service in 1945. But a couple of years before he passed away in 1992, over there at North Island, he passed away in 1994, but in 1992 when we got decommissioned, he's over at North Island, part of our retirement, our decommissioning service. So George Gay was president when Midway was launched into service and when she retired from service. So every time we come into this theater and we walk under the wing of this plane that bears his name, we honor the legacy and the service and the memory of that great American hero. But here, on the Midway, America's living symbol of freedom, we honor the legacy and the service of all of our veterans, active and reservists. So, do I have any veterans with me today? Any veterans? Can I see your hand? Active and reservists? To you and your families, thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. We appreciate you. So when you go into the theater, you're going to meet George, not George Gay, but George the Younger. George has served 4 tours aboard the Midway. 3 is active, and 1 is a docent. And the reason for that is he's still trying to get it right. Okay, so join us in the theater for Voices of Midway.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Placards are very sterile, static, a snapshot in time. This is the emotion behind the events that unfolded on that day being June 4th, 1942, the Battle of Midway, arguably the most significant naval battle of World War II for which this ship was named. USS Midway, the ship you're sitting on today, was built in World War II for World War II, with World War II technologies and engineering and design and materials. However, the ship was commissioned about a week after the war ended. So So this ship did not serve in World War II, but was named after that battle. That battle took place about 6 months after Pearl Harbor and a month after the Battle of Coral Sea. At the Battle of Coral Sea, the USS Yorktown, one of our carriers, was badly damaged. That ship limped back to Pearl Harbor, and at Pearl, Admiral Chester Nimitz asked how long it would take to have that ship ready to go back out to sea because he knew that the invasion of Midway Island was imminent by the Japanese. He was told about 3 months. He said, "I will give you 3 days." And so shipyard workers and sailors worked around the clock for 72 hours to turn that ship around, and she set sail to participate at the Battle of Midway, June 4th, 1942. When you came through the door over here, you came through a very large hole, a torpedo hole, and a damage control scenario. That's a replica of the torpedo hole and a damage that took place that sunk the USS Yorktown, which we lost at the Battle of Midway. I'm going to start the film in a moment. As I do, the lights will dim, they'll come back up, and when they do, please exit to your right. You're going to go out that door, not the door that we came in on. And as you watch it, I hope you gain a greater understanding of the events that unfolded that day, June 4th, 1942, 81 years ago this week. But more importantly, a greater appreciation for the sacrifices that were made in those 6 minutes that changed the world. And I'll be waiting for you outside because my eyes leak when I stay and watch it. And some of yours will too.
You're going to tour the island, and in order to tour the island, we need to give you a little talk on safety, because these are the original ladders that the sailors climbed on Midway. They haven't changed a bit. You're going to climb 4 steep ladders to get up there. There's angle iron across 2 of the ladders, so please watch your heads going up. Don't be turned around talking to the people behind you. Pay attention to what you're doing going up the ladder, and you'll be safe, okay? Let's see. If you have children, we recommend that if there's 2 adults, the children between you going up and coming down. If we only have 1 adult with the children, we recommend the children in front of you going up and behind you coming down, okay? So you can catch them if they happen to fall. Let's see. Cell phones, we would appreciate it if you would put them on vibrate, because it's a guided tour. You'll have a docent talking to you up there. Most of the docents are in my age range, and if something like a telephone goes off, they completely forget where they are at in their talk, and they have to start all over again, and you don't want that, okay? So, anyway, my name is Ed. I joined the Navy in 1954, and I served on Midway between 1970 and 1973. So, in fact, I'll tell you, I was a young lad, 9 years old when Midway was launched, and I remember 3 things from World War II at the movie theater where we got all the video. We call it video now. It was film. And they'd show it in between the 2 movies. And the 3 things that I remember are raising the flag on Iwo Jima, Mount Suribachi. I remember the USS Franklin limping back into Brooklyn Navy Yard. It was still smoldering in 1945. And I remember Midway being launched in September of 1945, the largest warship in the world. And she remained the largest warship in the world for 10 years. Midway was the first, built in 18 months, if you can believe that. 18 months, working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To give you a reference, it takes about 5 to 7 or 8 years to build a carrier now. So they built this ship and launched it in 18 months. Not only that, they were building 2 other carriers at the same time while they were building this one. So, a little bit about Midway, first U.S. carrier with a steel flight deck. Everything before Midway, they were wooden flight decks. I'm giving my age away a little bit, but the first carrier I served on had a wooden flight deck. They're made out of teak wood. We make lawn furniture out of teak wood now. This was a 3.5-inch thick steel flight deck on Midway, a 2.5-inch thick steel hangar deck. So the engineers knew she was going to be top heavy when they built her. But what they did to help to mitigate some of that top heaviness was they cut all the weight they could on the vertical above the waterline. And so that's one of the major reasons why when you walk around, you see the overheads are so low. It's not that everyone was so short back in that time, although they were a lot shorter than people now, I think. But it was because of that top heaviness that they were experiencing. Right here, where we're sitting now, notice the texture of the deck. It's very rough. It's called non-skin, and it's put on there with swabs or brushes, and what it's there for is to give us, running around on the flight deck, give us traction. Because we've got hydraulic fluid and grease, and we've got airplanes, jet aircraft turning with their tailpipes pointing at us, and so we need all the traction we can get running around the flight deck, and this is what gives it to us. It has a downside. If a jet does blow you down the flight deck, you're going to suffer because of the rough texture. But right there is, we got a new microphone here, I'm not used to it yet, but right here, these are called pad eyes. That's a pad eye, and that's where we tie everything down. Our aircraft are divided between the flight deck and the hangar deck when we're out to sea. The ship is always rocking and rolling. There's always a white caps out there. So we tie everything down. We tie the aircraft down, tractors down, tow bars down, anything that could become a missile, we tie it down. We tie it down just according to the weather. If we have a real nice day out to sea, not a lot of wind, we'd probably do a 6-point tie down on the aircraft, and that's 2 chains on the nose tire and 2 chains on each main mount wheel. If the weather deteriorates, if we get into a storm, we'll go up to 21-point tie downs, 7 tie downs on each wheel. So it just depends on the weather. But we keep the aircraft up on the flight deck and down on the hangar deck no matter what the weather. A very accurate general statement would be, if an aircraft is up on the flight deck, it's probably going to be flying. If an aircraft is down on the hangar deck, which is the deck you came aboard on, we're probably working on it. We're performing maintenance on it. About 80% of the maintenance we perform on aircraft is down there on the hangar deck. And we move the aircraft between the flight deck and the hangar deck with 3 elevators. We have 3 elevators. That's number 1 elevator right on the other side of that bunting there. Number 2 elevator is right back behind me, right on the other side of that fence there. And then number 3 elevator is across the flight deck over on the left-hand side. We can move 2 aircraft at a time on an elevator if we fold the wings. So we can move 6 aircraft between the flight deck and the hangar deck at any one time. Okay, let's see. I think that's probably most of it. Are there any questions on anything? I've been gabbing away here. How many airplanes did we have? Good question. We carried roughly 75 aircraft down here. That was during Vietnam, and I think this ship probably carried about 75 most of the time. Different types of aircraft, yes. We usually carried 3 attack squadrons. Attack squadrons are air-to-ground bombers. And then we carried 2 fighter squadrons, that's air-to-air combat. And then we carried refuelers, photo reconnaissance aircraft, helicopters, and early warning aircraft, for a total of about 75. Yes, sir?
How is this ship powered?
It's steam powered. Steam powered. Yep. And it might surprise you to find out that ship with this steam power, we used a maritime diesel, right? We burned a maritime diesel fuel to power this ship. All the carriers in the fleet now are nuclear powered, but they're steam powered. They just heat the water to make the steam with nuclear power. So they only have to be refueled once every 25 years or so, where we refuel to sea every 4 days, roughly. Yes. Every day. He's not a docent. He just shows up here. He's some kind of a guy from somewhere. I don't know. They're on the way. Okay, folks. Up.
Combat stevedore, so I was a supply officer with a Seabees battalion.
Oh, you were a Seabees. Very good. Thanks for your service. So here we are in the primary flight control tower. Again, you saw that Maverick buzz the tower, the tower. And up here we have 2 very important officers, the air boss and the mini boss. Now they were tailhook squadron commanders. They know what it is to fly on and off and command men to do that. Now men and women. The ship only had men on board, so I just want to set parameters. We were decommissioned in 92. Women did not get onto a ship until 94, a combat ship. So when I say men, that's what we have. And the air boss and the mini boss, the air boss is sitting where he's watching the landing, which is the most problematic area. Landing's kind of like a controlled crash. And the mini boss is watching the takeoff, the catapult, not as much of a problem. Now, the air boss is in charge of all aircraft movement on the hangar deck and flight deck. So when you came on board, you came through the hangar deck. That's the garage of the carrier. That's where we work on the aircraft. That can hold about 25. Our total complement of aircraft on the ship is 78. And those nuclear carriers also 78 aircraft. So not much difference as far as aircraft. So he's in charge of that movement. He's in charge of all aircraft in a 5-mile radius and 2,000 feet up. And he's in charge of all the 250 men on that deck that make things happen. He's like an orchestra conductor, I think. The fact is, there's a lot of orchestration of movement and activity. That's probably the most dangerous avenue in the world, is the flight deck. You know, we're shooting off a plane by catapult every 45 seconds. And that takes a lot of coordination. And when we're landing the plane, you're landing every 45 seconds. So when he lands, like the F-4 Phantom has caught the number 2 wire, he will roll out to right about in front of here and let go of the wire, then move aside, because another plane's coming 45 seconds later. So a lot of activity and a lot of safety issues, as you can imagine. Now we also have some other men that come up here called safety observers. So let's say I'm going to set up a squadron of F-18 Hornets. Those were the last jets that we had, the latest jets that we had on the ship since we were decommissioned in 92. By the way, the F-18 Hornets are still used by those nuclear carriers over there. And they also have F-35s. Well, let's say I'm going to send up a group of 8. I'm going to have a squadron observer come up here from their squadron. And if you could open up those cabinets right there you're leaning on, in there are NATOPs, Navy Operation Manuals, for each kind of aircraft that we have on the ship. So I'm going to have a squadron observer from the F-18 squadron up here that can help in case there's a problem bringing that plane back. We can refer to the manual and can interact with the pilot and the air boss. We also have a bosun mate up here. You see this screen here? This board can be moved out this way, and I have a bosun mate in the back. He's writing backwards, so I can see forwards. And now we have to move to the chart room. But I do have to say one thing. The names on this chart, this board, will never be erased. That's a memorial board for those who flew off and never came back. So let's go ahead now and to the chart room.
I'm sure they were here also.
They're on the way. Thank you.
My routine, I will listen between Saturday and
Watch your head. You're going back up?
Yeah.
Oh, good. You just sent your crew down?
My group, yeah.
Yeah, and is Bill up there now?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, good timing.
Yeah.
Hi, come on in, folks.
In fact, my last time over in Yokohama
Yeah.
was in Midway. She was just pulling out, going down to the Philippines, and then on her way to Persian Gulf.
So here, this is Yokosuka Harbor.
Yeah, that's where I saw her.
Yeah, in Japan. She was home ported here for 18 years.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to often load the medevacs.
Oh, you
boats
did?
and then they would unload them in Okinawa.
Oh, they would. Okay. My dad was stationed in that area. He was on a little island called Iyashima, which is off the coast of Okinawa.
Yeah. I know where it is.
Okinawa. And that's where the Japanese peace party landed on Iyashima. I've got those pictures.
Oh wow.
So it's kind of cool. Are they okay? Everybody okay? The kids and everything? Okay. All right. So here we are in the chart room. For obvious reasons, it's called the chart room. This is the quartermaster's work here. So this is where we're going to be doing our navigation. And the quartermasters report to the navigator. And we're going to do some taking of measurements off of land and calling in the coordinates and there's a fix. And now I'm going to be concerned about speed, time, and direction, and I'm going to monitor that all along so we know our course. We got into satellite navigation, so that's where I'm going to move us into that. We got NavSat. That was when we got really accurate. And but we even got better than that in the late 80s. At the end of this cabinet over here, there's the GPS screen. See the GPS over there at the end? That was very accurate. And that's because we got at least over 68, maybe more satellites circling the Earth now. For a while there, we only had maybe 12, and it was hard to catch a signal. It still can be hard to catch a signal sometimes. So we have a backup called the sextant. There's a picture there. There's a sextant in the cabinet there. We go back hundreds of years in doing celestial navigation. And so we would get angles on the sun, moon, and stars against the horizon. So it wasn't good at midnight. You had to have a horizon. And then we would measure, and then time, measure, time, measure. We had very accurate chronometers over here. So very accurate measurements. However, the best we can get was about 3 miles accuracy. But we'll take that in the open ocean. So I had the occasion to tour the Carl Vinson and their navigation bridge and their chart room. It's about 3 times as big as this. It's huge, laid out. And so when I walked in, I said, well, where are your charts? And I saw a bunch of TV screens. Beautiful charts on the TV screen. Everything's digital. Yeah. They don't have charts like this. They don't train on hard charts. Everything's trained digital now. So I was talking with the navigator, and I was trying to just fool around a bit. And I asked her, well, I guess with all this modern equipment, you don't need a sextant. And she said, oh yeah? And she went over and pulled out the drawer and pulled out her sextant. And I said, well, why? And I said, well, occasionally, just like the Midway couldn't catch a signal, sometimes we're in deep ocean, even with all those satellites, and we still can't catch a signal. And we'll use the sextant. But we take the data and put it in the computer. So you had the old and new, and I thought that was pretty fascinating. We have another piece of equipment here called a pedometer. Over here in the corner, it's a little machine here with graphs on it. It's very important for us to know how far a keel is above the bottom of the ocean. We don't want to scrape the bottom. If you do, you're not going to be captain very long. So the quartermasters have the obligation to watch our depth. Now the fact is that you are now floating 3 feet above the bottom of the ocean. So this is a floating museum. We're proud of that. And we have divers underneath scraping off barnacles. So, and then we have welding and other things going on underneath. We're really keeping the ship, who in 2025 will be 80 years old. And now, just think now, one other item is the safe. See the safe over there? That's where we have top secret documents. Except I was working one day and a fellow docent came up there, opened it up and took out his lunch. and I asked him, I mean, how can you do that? And he said, I worked here as a quartermaster, they never changed the lock. Oh, wow. And that's a true story, and I just think it's kind of funny. You're on a ship that was the largest ship in the world when it was built, and it held that title for 10 years. You're also on a ship that was the first armored carrier ever built, with 3.5 inches of steel on that flight deck and 2 inches on the hangar deck. It was built in 18 months by women, from 43 to 45, because it was built so fast, because we thought we'd have to invade Japan to end the war. And that's why armored carrier. These World War II carriers had wood decks that would not have withstood an invasion. Now, it's fortunate to note that we didn't have to invade Japan. The war ended, and so we were commissioned 8 days after that. So we never served in World War II or Korea. The reason why we were so big, we couldn't go through the Panama Canal. So they put us out in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean as a deterrent in the Cold War. We had atomic bombs on board, and we also shot a missile off our deck just to show the Russians we could do that. That was a one-off. And then after the 55, we were modified, and we went the long way around to Japan. Right here's Yokosuka Harbor chart. We were home ported to Japan for 18 years. Now the ship had 2 other cousins, the Coral Sea and FDR, Midway class. They were scrapped. So we were the longest serving ship in the 20th century, 47 years, till 92. We were very important in the Vietnam War. We had 3 tours of duty during the wartime. The F-4 Phantom on this jets on this ship shot the first MiG and last MiG down of the war. We shot 9 MiGs totally from the Midway. But one of the major events that took place in 1975 was the rescue from Saigon, which was being overrun by the Viet Cong, of 3,000 Vietnamese refugees who landed on our deck. And to do that, we pushed our helicopters over into the ocean. So the air boss was in charge of that with the captain. Captain became an admiral. Fact is, they pushed those over into the ocean so that all of the other helicopters could land. And it would save those 3,000 lives. That's a major event. It's the frequent wind exhibit on the hangar deck. And you see it in YouTube and other. So now, are they moving out? Okay, so I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to move into the navigation bridge. So follow me. John R. Lewis supply ship. Come on in, folks. Come on in. You can filter into the pilot house if you want. Come on in. So let me go ahead and tell you that this is a navigation bridge. This is where the commanding officer would sit over here, the navigator over there. The captain would be sitting there and really only get involved if there's a problem. I'm going to become the officer of the deck, so he designates me as officer of the deck. I'm going to be running this ship. I'll be communicating with the air boss, and I have a bunch of other officers up here. Junior officer of the deck, officer of the watch. I have a bosun mate in the corner keeping the captain's log up to date. But to really get this ship underway, I'm going to designate someone to become my conning officer. So if you saw in Star Trek where Captain Kirk says to Spock, "You've got the con," that means that person is the only one giving directions. Conning officer. Now I'm going to show you what happens when that happens. So I'm going to come back over here. By the way, I want to make note of it. The first woman commanding officer of a carrier is right there, the Abraham Lincoln. She took over 2 years ago. She just made admiral. So she's rolling off and they'll get a new commanding officer. So that's the story. Okay, back here, everybody. Now let's go ahead and turn. The conning officer is giving all the directions. Turn 105 degrees. Yeah, that's perfect. Now I need someone to turn the engine order telegraph right there. Anybody want to do that? I'll do it. He's gonna say, all right, flank speed. So I'm going flank speed. I send this order down to the engine room. The engine room then gets the order, turns their throttles, and away we go. We can go 32 knots. That's about 36 miles an hour. You could water ski behind it, but we don't recommend it. But why do we need to go so fast? By the way, we burn 200,000 gallons a day of oil for our boilers to go that fast. We need 30 knots of wind across the deck for efficient landing and takeoff. And I'm going to either steer into the wind and find it, and if I can't find that speed, I'm going to make my own wind by going that fast. So that's it. Now just think about it. You've got a 19-year-old bosunmate over here running 70,000 tons of ship at 32 knots. A year before, he had to get permission for the keys for the car. No, he just has to obey orders. That's what's the key. Doesn't even have to see where he's going. And so that's what's going on here. We also have a secondary con right over here. The auxiliary con. That's if we need to go to the right, more to the right. We do that over there, and so we can see where we're going. It's hard to see that far over when you're up front. We have a secondary con. If for time of war, let's say this island was blown off, we could still steer the ship. He's underneath the bow, under 3.5 inches of steel. I've got a mini conning tower right underneath there, so we can still steer the ship. And for some reason, if this connection to the rudder, two 20-ton rudders, is broken, I've got a sailor at each rudder steering the ship. So we have redundancy built in all through this. Now there's one other thing that we do on this side of the ship. It's called underway replenishment. See this boat here? We call it the Costco of the Sea. You see that over there, the John R. Lewis, next to the Vincent? It's the supply ship. Every 6 days they're going to line up against us. About 100 yards out, about 15 knots together, and they're going to send over lines for fuel, and then crane lines for hard goods. Helicopter visits will drop all kinds of goods on our deck. That's underway replenishment for fuel for the ship, jet fuel, food, and other hard goods and ordnance, weapons. So I have a 2.2 million gallon tank of fuel for the engine here, for these engines, in a boiler. I got to make my steam through boiling. They have a nuclear core. They make their steam, boiling water with nuclear energy. They still need underway replenishment for food, but not for Navy fuel. Okay, everybody, follow me out.
Carrier and being solely responsible for the safety of so many sailors in one of the most dangerous environments you can find anywhere. It's a humbling responsibility, one that I'll value for the rest of my life. Well, I'll have to finish my paperwork here. Flight ops are about to start. I hope you'll think about the extraordinary dedication of my crew as you continue your tour. They make Midway magic every day. Thanks for coming aboard.